However, your sister's been murdered, and you're telling me that you're more interested in your sexual desire than finding out who killed your sister? Hello my loves, and thank you for joining me. It's Kirsten and we are doing an unhaul. So we have 26 books here. I'm pretty ruthless. I like going through my shelves, and generally whenever I get a new book or a few new books that means I have to reshuffle a few things, I do go through my shelves, look at my books and decide, okay, do I actually want to keep you? Or if I've been reading a book and I finish it and I'm like, you know what, never going to pick this back up again, go straight onto my unhaul pile. And once I get a little pile like this, which is off screen, that's when I start doing these unhauls, which works out probably about twice a year that I will do them. I just feel like there's no point keeping books on my shelf that I'm not going to either reread or that I didn't enjoy. Like, what's the point? Anyway, that's rambling. Now let's get to the actual unhaul. So we have From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Now this book I actually did enjoy. I did give it 5 stars. However, I think that was more, I was caught up in the moment. I was wanting a fantasy romance, which is, this is what it is. We're following Poppy, and she is a maiden. She is not allowed to be touched, have any human contact at all really, and not allowed to really talk to people either. It's something where she is there for this big ceremony, but she doesn't know anything about it, and we're in this world where this thing called an ascension happens, and again, nobody talks about what it actually is, but there are this other side of it where we're at war with this kind of, I don't want to give too much away. Does it say it on the back though? Okay, no, it doesn't say it on the back, so I'm not going to say what it is. But they are at war with this other people, and then we have Hawk comes along to be Poppy's new bodyguard, and we have a romance and everything that follows. Now the reason why I'm actually unhauling these is, one, I probably won't reread this. I did enjoy it at the time, gave it the 5 stars. In all honesty, it's probably just like a 3-star book, but it was what I wanted at the time. And also the third book, I've heard nothing but bad reviews, and it just makes me want to not pick it up. Honestly, I do prefer Sarah J. Maas. Like, if I want a fantasy romance fix, I'll pick up Sarah J. Maas. Then we have Saw Kill Girls by Claire Legrand, and this is one that was a bit upsetting. So I read Claire Legrand's other works, which is Furyborn and that trilogy. It's a really good YA fantasy trilogy. I really enjoyed that. So that's why I picked up this book, and it's meant to be more of like a horror YA, but I didn't like it. It just kind of felt a bit X-Men-ish towards the end of it, and I was just like, I don't like this. It had high hopes at the start. We're following 3 girls, and one family has come onto this island. Girls keep being killed, and no one really understands why, and of course this new family that comes in gets tangled up in everything. Our main character's sister just goes missing, and then you get drawn into this world. And at first I really liked it because it was like witchy aspects and stuff, but then it changes from witchy to X-Men, and I was a bit like, no. Then we have To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I read this for my GCSEs and I haven't picked it up since. I did like the story. I do think it is a good story. It's one that I may consider reading again, but I honestly rather just a different edition of it. This is honestly a very impactful tale. It's one that I do recommend people reading if it interests you. We're following a child of a lawyer, and this lawyer decides to represent a black man because he's been accused of raping this white girl, even though the girl in question, her family is seen as the dregs of society. The black man, because he's black, and even though he physically cannot have committed this crime, is still the one that gets persecuted for it. And so we have this lawyer that is trying to defend him, and the town's like, you know, you shouldn't be doing this. And honestly, it's such a important book. I do just want a different edition of it, and it's not one I've read since. So it's one of those ones that I'm in 2 minds whether I'm going to unhaul this. I'm putting it in this video because it's been on this pile for a little while now, but I am interested because like they've done a graphic novel version, so I'll probably pick that up because I've already read the original and I would like a bigger edition. This is kind of like a small edition and it just doesn't fit with my books, so then that's what's going to happen. So this isn't an unhaul because this is a bad book. It is fantastic, it's brilliant, it's impactful, I highly recommend it. It's just not a book that I personally want to keep this edition of. Okay, then we have a book that I do absolutely love, and that's Cashel's Dark by Jacqueline Clary. It's just my edition of this is falling apart, and I did buy myself a new copy, so that's the only reason why this is being unhauled, is literally just because it's falling apart. That's it. I love this world. I really love these books. I think it's amazing. We're following Fidre. I'm not sure how to pronounce this, but it's beautiful. We're in basically an alternate history to our world, and we're based in France, and Fidre is someone that has grown up in a pleasure hall. This religion that we have throughout this book is love as thou wilt. So even though she is brought up in a pleasure hall, they have very strict rules on what happens during these pleasure halls. They have different things. It's all based around an actual religion, which I think is beautiful. It's a lovely religion. Yes, there are some very explicit scenes in this, but you're following Fidre from a child as she grows up, and she also gets tangled in a war, which I think, based on how this map layout is kind of with Russia. But don't quote me on that because my geography is terrible. But they are at war with another country, and the war is spiking to high levels, and Fidre gets caught up in it and ends up turning almost spy for the Queen of Terre d'Ange, which is basically France, and ends up going out and doing all these different things to try and help stop this war. So it's a really good book. You've got so many politics and stuff as well as religion in here, and it's really, really gripping. I really liked this trilogy. I think it's amazing. I just have clearly read it a lot because the pages are falling apart, so we've got a new copy, so I don't need this battered version. Then we have The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, and this is a book I just couldn't get on with. I did want to pick this up because my dad does love J.R.R. Tolkien, and he is the one that took me to cinema to see all the Lord of the Rings films, and don't get me wrong, love the films, love the Lord of the Rings, I think it's amazing, but I didn't like The Hobbit. I found it to be a bit frustrating. I know this was designed to be more of a child's book, but I didn't like it. I did listen to the audiobook, and the narrator is freaking amazing. He's the voiceover actor for Gollum, which perfect in this book. I thought it was fantastic. He does an amazing job of bringing this story to life. But the actual story itself, I just did not enjoy, and I found it really frustrating because there's a lot of fat phobia in here, and it was just a bit like, you know what, yes, okay, this particular dwarf is fat. We don't need it said about 6 different ways every single time you're talking about this person. It was really, really frustrating for me to read. And then just other things about the writing and stuff I just couldn't get on with. It makes me apprehensive to read Lord of the Rings, but I'm hoping that because it's his adult work, I will prefer it. But in all honesty, I am probably going to save that for a later time rather than now, or anytime soon, to be honest. But yeah, I am disappointed. You know, I grew up with Lord of the Rings and my dad's love of that, and you know, I did want to really enjoy this book. I just couldn't get on with the writing, unfortunately. I didn't really explain what The Hobbit was because I assume most people know. But basically you have this quest that goes on. We have Bilbo, who is a hobbit who teams up with some dwarves, and they want to vanquish a dragon. So that's kind of a very brief summary of that book. Then we have a trilogy, and that's the Grishaverse. So we have Shadow and Bone, Siege and Storm, Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. I didn't like these. You know what, the first book I gave 4 stars. I thought it had really good characters in it. I really liked the Darkling. I honestly thought it had really good promise. But then I hated Siege and Storm. Absolutely hated that book. And then Ruin and Rising, I was so disappointed because of what happens to the Darkling that I was like, no, I'm never going to pick these up. Honestly, I kept them for so long because they're pretty, and when I was doing my rainbow shelves a little while ago, they looked really good on the rainbow shelves, but I'm just not a fan of this work. I have since enjoyed Leigh Bardugo's adult book, Ninth House. I really enjoyed that, but I just don't like this YA trilogy, and I think also that's because YA fantasy in general is something that I am coming out of. Unless they are very particular things or very particular authors, then I'm keeping them, but otherwise I am kind of getting out of YA fantasy, and I think it's just because it can be so similar all the time. But the main reason why I didn't like this is because the subsequent books were atrocious in my opinion, and I really hate Mal as a character. He is so frustrating. But we're in this world where you have people that are Grisha, and they have different powers, and depending on your power you get put into this kind of category of people. And we're of course following a girl who has a rare power that hasn't been seen in absolutely ages, and so she gets taken in and trained with the Grisha. The Darklin, who is the person that kind of rules over the Grisha, takes a massive interest in her, and they are at war. This rift that is filled with really dark creatures, and so they need the help of Grisha to cross it, but they're also, people don't like Grisha, and there's a lot of different countries that have so much prejudice against them. So there's a lot going on, there's a lot of political stuff. That's why I was so intrigued. I really liked the connection between Darklin and Elena, who is our main character. I really liked that. I thought the Darklin was such an interesting character, but then it just kind of flopped for me on the last 2 books, so yeah, unfortunately not for me. Then we have Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan, and this I picked up because it was going around Instagram that if you really liked the Darklin, then this is kind of like what if Elena and the Darklin got together, which is what I would have rather have happened in the books for Leah Bardugo's books. However, yes, there are so many crossovers between the two. Like, honestly, I would say that this is kind of like fan fiction. It's a slightly different world, but we still have that our main character is the only one that can do these particular things. Like, she can call upon different saints to give herself power. We have this world where they're kind of controlled by magicians. I want to say magicians, but they're not quite magicians, but they are in a way, because they have these magical abilities, but it's dark magic, it's using blood. They're trying to overthrow people that our main character belongs to, who believes in saints and not dark magic as they call it. It just felt like fan fiction, and again, this is something that at the time I gave it 4 stars. Would I ever reread it, and do I want to continue on with the series? No, but if you do like the Darklin and you want a bit of fan fiction, then maybe check it out. Then we have Naomi Novik's A Deadly Education, and honestly I picked this book up because I was so intrigued by the first line. I thought it was really good. Let me get the actual first line, hang on. I decided that Orion needed to die after the second time he saved my life. It just intrigued me. I thought it was hilarious. Unfortunately, I couldn't gel with the writing. I really like everything about this book. I think it's really like beautiful maps. We're following our main character and she is attending this school for magicians, yet the school is trying to kill them, and basically to graduate you need to survive the school. It is interesting. I like the concept. Again, it's got good promise. I didn't like the execution of it, and I just... yeah, unfortunately for me, this is one of the books where I was just a bit like, yes, potential, no, I don't like it. Some people argue it's kind of like dark academia. I would say it's a dark academia aesthetic and not actually dark academia as far as the way I like to perceive them. And I just, again, this was like YA fantasy that had potential, especially like on the back when it goes, you know, a dark, smart, delicious tale. It's not that. Like, we are attending a school for magic, but it just didn't do it for me, unfortunately. A lot of it was so confusing, nothing's really explained. We're not fully understanding why the school is trying to kill these children all the time, because it's filled with magical creatures that are just trying to eat them for their magic. I just feel like there were so many things that could have been developed a bit more. Yes, it may do in the second book, but also, can I actually commit myself to reading the second book? No. On a similar vein, we have another book that's quite popular, and that's Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. This is something that I picked up because I got it for £1. And yeah, again, this is not something that I'm that interested in. My sister really liked this series, so I picked it up because of that, as well as Ashley from A Frolic Through Fiction. She also really likes this series. It just wasn't for me. Again, it has a lot of potential. We have a lot of things that I would be interested in, because we're following Paige and she's a dream walker, a clairvoyant, and so clairvoyants are people that have been oppressed, that are constantly hunted down, and they kind of live in like almost like a sub-level of society where if you're a clairvoyant and you're on your own, it's dangerous for you. So generally clairvoyants end up within a gang, and that's for protection because there's more of you in numbers and stuff. I don't know, again, this had so much potential because I liked the idea of the clairvoyants. There are different categories of clairvoyants. Again, we're following that trope of Paige is slightly different and she has a really interesting clairvoyant ability that not many other people have, if any. But then she gets caught and ends up being imprisoned, and then she discovers something completely mind-blowing, where she's like, everything we've been taught is such a lie, and she ends up having to be almost a slave for this completely different race, almost like godlike beings. But there was a romance in this that did not make sense. Like, I did not understand it at all, and I was just like, wait, what? When did this happen? How did this happen? So I didn't like that. Also, the way it ended just made me go, well, I don't understand why this book's even going. There was a lot about this book, again, potential for a lot of things that I would like, but just not executed in a way that I enjoy, and I'm not sure whether that's because this felt more YA with those tropes that I'm just getting a bit tired of. Then we have a YA duology. Again, that same thing where it's not bad, but it's not something that I would reread, and that's All the Stars and Teeth and All the Tides of Fate by Adeline Grace. I initially picked this up because, well, look at these covers. Aren't they just fantastic? That is the reason why I picked them up. Didn't like it. So we're following our main character, and she is a daughter of this person that has this kind of like bone magic. So it's a magic that is very difficult, no, soul magic. So it's very difficult to control. It is very dangerous, but the person with soul magic rules over these magical lands, and the world is split up so that depending on your magical power depends on what land you live in, and you're only allowed to have one magical power. So if you settle on one magic, you have to stay with that magic for the rest of your life. You're not allowed to learn another magic. On the day of this girl's birthday, she has to show her prowess with soul magic to prove that she's got control over it. However, her showing goes terribly wrong and she gets imprisoned for it. Somebody comes along to help her escape, and she starts traveling what was meant to be her kingdom, and she realizes how much she has not been told, how much is maybe lies that goes along with that. And then in the second book, you have her where she's taken over, she's now queen, and then these things start happening, except she doesn't learn. She has no character growth. She makes the same mistakes, the same problems, doesn't want to fix it, doesn't want to deal with the consequences, and then somebody else does it all for her. And I'm just like, that is so frustrating, because somebody that is meant to be a ruler should be better apt to actually deal with the problems that you are creating and not expect other people to run around after you cleaning it all up. I was so frustrated and annoyed with the ending that honestly that's why I'm giving these up. Okay, so similar again, YA fantasy that I'm just not vibing with, and that's Bonecryer's Moon by Catherine Purdy. This is one that I was interested in. I thought it was going to be really interesting. It's kind of like witchy vibes. We're following these girls that are pretty much witches. They have this bone magic, and depending on the bones of the animals that you have killed will depend on what special abilities that you get. So some might get extra hearing or swiftness or things like that depending on the animal bones that they collect. However, for them to continue on with their witch, I'm going to call it a tribe, it's not really a tribe, but their witch tribe, they have to lure in a love interest with this song. They then live together for a year, and then she has to kill the person. So it's their one true love, and she's meant to kill them. Obviously this goes terribly wrong. Our main character is her friend that's actually doing all of that, and our main character is really struggling with trying to be better because she doesn't like the fact that she has to kill animals. She doesn't like what she's doing, and it develops from there, and I do like it. You have a bit of an enemies to lovers going on. It's just, again, the ending of it just flopped so hard and was so predictable, and I was like, again, you had so much potential in this book for something awesome. I'm just looking for that darker fantasy part, and just where this is YA, it just doesn't do that. It just kind of skims over those darker bits that could have been delved into a lot more. Okay, then we have actually a couple of classics. So the first one is The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy. This is a Penguin Little Black classic book. What I didn't realise when I picked it up is that it's actually a scene within Anna Karenina, and I already own that book. Yeah, I don't need to keep this. And then we have Shirley Jackson's The Missing Girl. This was a collection of 3 stories. This was just weird. This ended up being 2 stars. It did its job in making me intrigued to read more of Shirley Jackson's work. However, I will not reread this. And this is the Penguin modern little books. Her writing is so different. It is so unusual, and I'm very intrigued to see what she does when she has a book that's actually longer than like 15 pages, which is all you really got throughout these stories. It really does intrigue me in her writing style. It's very unusual, very surreal, slightly horror elements to it from this little collection. But yeah, as I said, it was 2 stars. I would prefer a book that is a bit longer so I can actually delve into it a bit more. Okay, so we do have the second book. I knew it was going to turn up eventually, and that's Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, which is the second book in the From Blood and Ash series. Again, I've already spoken about it. I don't really need to go into detail. We know that I did enjoy them when I first read them, but I am just dubious about that third book considering everybody has said how terrible it is. So it just makes me not want to actually reread these or continue on with the series. It's gotta go. And then we have another book which I think initially I gave 4 stars, and that's One of Us is Lion by Karen M. McManus, and I did enjoy this when I read it. However, I think there are other YA murder mysteries that I prefer more that I would reread. I wouldn't reread this because when you know the twist, it's okay. I think it's like all murder mysteries. It has to be something that really intrigues you to make you want to reread this to see can you piece it all together. And as much as I didn't see the twist coming and I did enjoy it, this is not a book I would reread. It's a shame because I did like it and I was going through a YA murder mystery streak. Okay, my camera stopped and I don't know where we were at. So I'm just gonna carry on with this being a YA murder mystery that I'm not going to reread, and that's the only reason why I'm unhauling it. I did enjoy it when I first read it, but yeah, I don't know where we're at because my camera rudely stopped, so we're just moving on. We have another classic, and that is The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells, but this is the illustrated classic edition, which is not the original classic. This is a Indian English version of the classic, which I did not realise when I picked this up from a charity shop. I would just like to get a English copy of it and have the original full story because this has been adapted for children, them learning from it. I did like this edition because you have lots of like illustrations and stuff in it, but I do want to read the original story and not something that's been adapted for children to read in schools. Again, another little black penguin classic, and that's Olala by Robert Louis Stevenson. I picked this one up because I was really intrigued. I have since read it. It was okay. I think if it had been a full story it would have been amazing. There is a lot of things that I think is a starting premise for this book. However, what I didn't realise is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the copy that I have of that, includes that story within it, and I didn't realise. So again, I don't need this as an extra copy because I already have it, which is exactly the same for the next 3 books. So we have 3 classic books. These are the Penguin Black Classic Editions, and we have Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson, and The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Now these 3, I enjoy these 3 classics. I think they are, oh sorry, there is so much dust, it is physically trying to kill me. What was I saying? Right, yeah, these 3 books, I do recommend all 3 of them. I think they are absolutely amazing. I love these classic books. They are some of my absolute favourites. However, I really don't like these editions. I really don't. And I do actually have editions of all 3 of these books that I do want to keep, which I am keeping, and they just have different covers and everything, which I just prefer over these. So don't get me wrong, I am not above keeping multiple copies of classic books. I think it's amazing, or just books in general. If you really enjoy a book, there is nothing wrong in keeping multiple copies of that book for collecting purposes. There is a difference between reading books and collecting books, like massive difference. But I just don't like these editions. These are editions that I originally got because they are cheap. All of them were, I think the most expensive, yeah, was this one at £6.99. But all 3 of these are fantastic books, great if you're looking for that horror, gothic literature. It just works fantastically. I have read these editions, but I do have different editions that I prefer, and I don't want to clog up my shelves with editions of books that I don't like. So that's why these are going. Okay, we're down to the last few books. We have another classic, which is Lady Chatterley's Lover by D.H. Lawrence, and honestly I didn't really enjoy this book and I wouldn't reread it. It was okay. We're following this woman who ends up marrying someone who I think has an accident, and she ends up being more of a carer to him than anything else and just feels very lonely in her relationship, and so she ends up having an affair with one of the people that looks after their grounds, so the groundskeeper. And it's all about that really, and you know what, yes, there is some commentary on here that you can definitely pick up. Would I reread this? No. Do I think it's anything amazing? Not really either. So this was just an okay book, and I was originally going to keep it because it is a classic and I wanted to keep classics on my shelves. However, I've kind of hit that point now where I'm just like, no, I want my shelves to be full of books that either I haven't read yet or I've really enjoyed them. That's all I want them to be. I don't want them to be collections of books that I thought were meh, they were alright, but I wouldn't pick it up again, so there's no point keeping it. The last two books that I want to talk about, and that is Kingdom of the Wicked and Kingdom of the Cursed by Kerri Maniscalco. I really wanted to love this series. I really like Kerri Maniscalco's Stalking Jack the Ripper series, and anyone that's read that first and enjoyed that series does say that these are disappointing, or at least that's what I found. Now, some people absolutely adore these books and think they're fantastic. I just couldn't get beyond them. We are following our main character whose twin sister gets murdered. They are witches, and at the same time there are other witches that are being murdered, and so our main character is very much like, I'm going to find out why witches are being killed, and so she has to interact with the 7 princes of hell that represent the 7 deadly sins, which I really liked that aspect of it. This did feel very kind of whimsical-ish. She's going from prince to try and find out information. They are making her go through these different trials and things like this. She then at the end of this book ends up going to hell with one of the princes, which is where we are in this book, and this book I DNF'd. It lost sight of the whole we are trying to find out who is killing witches and the fact that her twin sister had been murdered, and went more on the path of, I've discovered that I can have sexual desire and it's okay. Don't get me wrong, that's an amazing message to have, because yes, women are allowed to feel sexual desire and should not feel ashamed for it. However, your sister's been murdered and you're telling me that you're more interested in your sexual desire than finding out who killed your sister? What? What? If that was my sister, I would not be going, but this prince is so hot, that's all I want. I'd be going, who the hell killed my sister, because you're going to be next. That did not happen in this, and it frustrated me so much, and so much of the book is like her whole, I'm discovering that I can be a sexual person, because this is written in a time where women were just meant to get married and have kids. They were not meant to enjoy sex. That was just for the man's pleasure, which yes, good thing that she's discovering that, but do you need it repeated over and over and over again? And should that overshadow the fact that witches are being murdered and that was the whole reason why you went down into hell in the first place? No, it should not. There we go, that was my rant, I'm done. That book is the one that I feel most strongly against. All these other books have literally just been ones that either I've read but were a bit too on the young side of YA, or a bit too tropey for like older tropes that I feel like we have just gone past now and my interests have changed, or I have multiple copies of that book, or I just don't want to continue on, or something like. But that book, that made me annoyed, in case you couldn't tell. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on unhauling. You know, is it something that you like to do? Are you someone that likes to just keep hold of all your books? As I said, I'm not that sort of thing. I want my shelves to reflect the books that I actually enjoy. I love doing a spring cleaning of through my shelves and just taking off books that I know I'm not going to read anymore. I think it's great. Some of them I keep for nostalgia purposes, but some of them I'm just like, no, we don't need to keep hold of this. Oh my god, the book file has fallen. That's a sign I should stop rambling. Anyway, if you have made it this far, let's put what emoji should we put for an unhaul? I would say like a spring cleaning. Is there a cleaning emoji? Hang on. Ah, there is a cleaning emoji. So let's put like the sponge emoji for like cleaning, because I've been cleaning off my shelves of books that I don't want to keep anymore. Anyway, I have rambled, I have ranted, we have had an experience. We've also had dust trying to kill me left, right and centre, like damn. So yeah, so if you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it that thumbs up, subscribe, comment to let me know that you're here. Social media links will be linked below, and I will of course catch you in the next one.